In terms of technologies, I'm usually very humbled when I deal with the future of technology because as a futurist, you learn how to be wrong an awful lot. And you start to hone your research techniques. I give a talk on the guidelines to the future or the guidelines to future thinking. And one has to be very careful when you talk about the future of technology because technology is a socio-technical field. It doesn't just emerge somewhere from a machine. It reacts to how we use it and if we use it. So you can have an invention that people totally ignore because they can't see any use to this, even though the developer of that technology thinks it's the hottest gizmo that it has ever been developed, and I don't understand why people are not reacting to it, and they realize that they've moved up against the wall of social acceptance. People either don't see the use for it or they're not ready for it.
Future literacy. The ability to understand, if not necessarily predict, the future. Most organizations, when they run into problems, it's usually because they've either overestimated something that would occur out in the future environment, or they underestimate something that could not impact them. It's kind of interesting when you think about future literacy. Most of the analysts who are analyzing companies that you would invest in, up until about 2 weeks ago, had Bear Stearns on its list for purchasing. And they suggested, even though Bear Stearns was at around $50, $60, $70 a share, you should buy it and then sell it $100, which is what the direction that they thought this was moving in. Within 8 days, we saw a meltdown of incredible proportions and almost frightening proportions. How could everyone miss the boat? Why were people gathering over a weekend, over a Thursday night, trying to salvage what was left of Bear Stearns that was finally put up for $2 a share? Without going into the particulars of Bear Stearns, the issue becomes pretty clear that somebody was misreading not just the financial issues, but what was taking place within the world as we know it. And I think the one thing we can predict as futurists, that they're misinterpreting this even further at this point, and we'll probably have one or two more devastating revelations over the next month or so.
I teach a course at the MBA level at my university in the management of technology in organizations. And I have people do presentations on any type of technology they want. It could be the latest in automotive technology. And, we deal with it from the point of view of gaming it, do scenario building. Why would people accept it? Why wouldn't people accept it? And somebody did a presentation. This was in the year 2000. She was Japanese from Japan. And she did a presentation on this technique that people were using to communicate, because we all just were getting into cell phones around 2000. It was now popular to have one. And she talked about people walking around Tokyo doing this. Now, I have to tell you what the response of our technologically cutting-edge students was. The reaction was never. Never. And the question was, how do you do that and walk? And she said, no, they're quite proficient. They do it with, they do this as they walk. They don't look at it. They know where, they can do this without actually, it's a tactile issue. And he said, well, why would you do that? Because what we understood was the progression of technology was phone to better phones to mobile phones to something beyond that, where maybe it would be a video phone, a holographic phone. I mean, if we want to talk about the future, maybe it will be a holographic future. Maybe it will be virtual reality. And that's what you would think in terms of progression. Now, when you think
I've known people who are ex-teachers who retired on their anniversary date from school systems and then kind of get brought back into the system to start teaching who? Executives who now have retired from their corporations and now want to become teachers at the very age, ironically, at which the people teaching them, tutoring them in teaching, left that teaching career. So we see people coming back to this in two ways. One of them as kind of mentors to people who want to come into their fields, and then the people who want to come into these fields. This could go on at 60, 70, and beyond. This is after this would involve retraining, family time, personal development of some types along the lines of that university of the third age.
In the 1980s, I can't identify the company or the consulting group. I'll just tell you the story because it's a tale out of school. But they were considering whether we would use these cell phones. They didn't call them cell phones, car phones, whatever. And if the American public would be interested in that. So they ran what's called the focus group. Okay, we bring people together. And we bring the group together that's the most likely adopters of this technology. Who would really need this? And they brought salespeople together in a room, and they showed them the technology. And they showed them, and definitely salespeople, my goodness, I mean, this is going to, you have this and your competition doesn't. You'll be on the road, and you'll be way ahead of them. You'll be getting pricing from your home base. You'll be calling people ahead, and you'll definitely have this. And in focus group after focus group, the response was, not in my life. I don't want this in my car. You're going to double your income. The response was, yes, but my car is the only place I can get to be alone. And this response was repeated time and time again. Based on that, this particular communication company, I can't say what it was, but they're really big, made the decision based on the consultant's suggestion, and the consultant is really big. Based on their company, they decided that the maximum penetration of cell phones into the United States would maybe be 3 million people. We're working on a population base of 320 million right now. This decision, by the way, cost them billions of dollars. What has happened? So people, a lot of the young people today say it's unfair that my employer wants to look at my Facebook. Because, you see, the Facebook world is that wonderful Wild West atmosphere in which anything goes, but that's leisure studies for me. The real world is the work world, and they should not intersect, but the person is saying, no, no, you have made available information about yourself which is perfectly legal for me to share. You've shared it with me. You've shared it with the public. And I think what's going to happen in the future, if I had to make a future prediction, the future prediction would be that people will start to learn how to control their message, and they will learn to do it from an early age. And I don't think they will be taught by universities to do this. I think this will begin very early on. People who want to be successful, who can envision themselves as CEO or president, will begin to close those loopholes that exist in the social media environment at an early age, and I mean by 13 or 14 or whatever age at which society has decided to hold us accountable for the things we did on a weekend. And people will start to do this. Now, it's not so easy to control that message. People in power can't control the message. The hacking that's taking place, forget about what News Corps did. Groups like Anonymous, Lulz Sec have hacked Sony, NATO, the FBI, the Navy. So, and what they get from these, if you've ever seen, and I've known people who've seen these files, is humiliating and embarrassing, personally and to the organizations themselves. WikiLeaks was an embarrassment a day, which the mainstream media, by the way, could not prevent itself from reporting on. They gravitated towards it. They couldn't wait for the next diplomatic communique to reveal itself. So people in power, as Mr. Wiener can attest, have not learned how to control the message. People in sports can't control the message. But the people who get hurt the most, it seems, is just the run-of-the-mill average person who's trying to be a success in life, who suddenly finds that companies that are looking at 200 to 300 applications for every single job will look for any excuse not to hire, and that's the way they're approaching employment today. So the question really becomes, how do we control that? And I think it's going to be an education process, and it's going to have to be done by the same people who educate you about how you navigate your way through life in general, which are your parents, which means that it will take probably a media-savvy parent cohort to really begin to communicate to people how to control that message. And people will have to start looking at themselves like an enterprise. There are already firms out there, reputation defenders, that will look to see who's saying negative things about you. Well, you can't really control that sometimes because there's a rumor mill, but you can at least control what it is that you're saying about yourself. So to that extent, I think what the future is really going to look like in the near future in terms of the media itself, and I know it took up a lot of time here, sorry, is that I think what's going to happen is that people will start to learn that they're going to have to take control of the message. And they're going to have to start seeing themselves in a very different way than they did, say, 10 years ago. How do you do this with someone who's 12, who fears nothing? That is going to be a challenge. But other than that, I actually have a very positive view towards the social media. I think it's a powerful technique.